I am currently in my late 20s, but at the time of these events, my 8th grade school year had just ended. I was excited that I was going to be able to spend the entire summer with my two closest buddies, and that we would be heading into 9th grade together. We didn't really do much other than just hang out, play PS2, play some basketball outside, and message girls from our class on Instant Messenger, which I hope most of you remember. If not, then I guess I'm getting old. We would usually hang out at my house because my parents were always pretty cool with my friends being there. And the way my house was set up, we had a ton of privacy, which was awesome for teenage boys acting like idiots. My house at the time was located on a pretty quiet street, but my neighborhood was in close proximity to the more rough sections of my hometown. A close walk from my house was a corner store that sold really cheap soda, chips, and candy. This was obviously a frequent destination for me and my friends. Well, about a week after 8th grade ended, my two buddies were staying overnight, like they always did. We thought it would be a cool idea to sneak out of the house after my parents went to sleep and walk to the corner store a few blocks away. Of course, not to do anything crazy, but just to have the thrill of being out late on our own. And being a foolish teenager, I had no awareness of the danger I was potentially putting myself and my friends in. Around 11, my parents went to sleep, and that's when we decided to sneak out of the house. At first, the thrill of being out was awesome, but the feeling soon changed when we got to the store. We went in there with about $20, and we planned on spending it on a whole bunch of snacks. We all split up to grab certain things. I was in the back corner looking at the soda when I saw somebody lurking in the opposite corner. The only reason why this was concerning to me was because he was facing me and not facing the shelves of products. I pretended I didn't notice him, because who knows, maybe it was just a coincidence. As I looked at the Faygo sodas, I noticed in the reflection of the cooler that the shadowy figure was now moving closer and still facing me. I quickly grabbed a 2-liter and went and found my friends. I darted away, and when I looked back, the figure was standing right where I was just a moment ago and still facing me. I was freaked out, but didn't want to let my friends know. I also want to add that there was nobody else in the store other than us, the cashier, and this person. We grabbed our stuff and headed to the cashier. I was trying to be quick about it, but my friends were being stupid and loud, perhaps trying to show off, but honestly, I was just freaking out. We started the several block walk home. I was moving pretty fast, and finally, my friend stopped and asked what my problem was. I told them what had happened in the store, and they seemed pretty rattled as well. We continued moving quickly. My house was maybe only 100 feet away at this point, when we noticed that the person from the store was now rushing full speed up the hill towards us. We ran as fast as we could. Lucky for us, the lunatic was still quite a distance away. We ran into the front door and tried to remain quiet to not wake my parents. We locked the door and made sure all the lights were off. The person reached my house and started to bang on the front door angrily. That's when I finally gave in to logic and woke up my parents, who immediately called the authorities. I tried yelling through the door that we called the cops, and the person didn't seem to respond. He just kept trying to open the door and continued banging on it. After a minute or two, he took a decorative stone from our front yard and broke the window next to the front door. That is when I finally got a good look at the guy. He tried to climb into the window, and the broken glass knocked his hood off. He was completely expressionless. He had dirty blonde hair, was clean shaved, and honestly, looked like an average Joe. He was about halfway through the window when my dad came out with a bat and started swinging it at him. Before there was a full-on fight, we saw the lights and heard sirens. The cops got out of the car, screaming, and pulled the man out of the window. It was the most intense thing I had ever seen in front of my eyes. The man was obviously arrested. Apparently, he had no criminal history and no history of drugs or alcohol. When questioned by the cops, he said, "Honestly, I was bored, and I just felt like being a little bit evil tonight." We had no idea what his intentions were, but just felt incredibly lucky that we somehow came out of the event physically unharmed. I still think about that night over a decade later. I used to stay up for hours, thinking if we weren't that far ahead of him, he could have caught up to us and possibly hurt us. I also used to stay up for hours in fear that he would show up at my house again when I least expected it. It just goes to show you that even the most harmless decision can sometimes lead to consequences you regret the most. When I was a kid, my best friend from kindergarten's family would invite me to go to the skating rink with them every Friday night. It was a routine thing that I looked forward to every week. My mum knew her mum, who was a nice lady, and my mum trusted her with me for a couple of hours at a skating rink. However, my mum had a strict no sleepovers policy because I was too little, so I was not allowed to stay over at their house. Also, even though my mum knew my friend's mum, she didn't know her dad. She was not comfortable sending me there overnight when she didn't know both parents. My friend's dad was very weird. So weird that I was creeped out, even at age 5. He would always buy me stuff at the skating rink, and he would try to convince me to sit on his lap, which I always refused to do. I was too busy having fun with my friend, which was a lot more appealing to me than sitting on a weird old dude's lap. I remember that when I said no, he would try to emotionally manipulate me into doing it anyway. He would ask, "Aren't we friends? If we are friends, then you wouldn't want to make me sad." And then he would make sure that I could see him sulking all evening, because I hurt his feelings by wanting to skate instead of sit on his lap. And he would always invite me to spend the night, despite the fact that my mum said no every single time. It was never my friend's idea to have me stay the night. It was always her dad insisting that I come for a sleepover. He would always tell me to ask my parents if I could stay over every time they dropped me off at my house. I'm not sure why, but for some reason, one Friday night, my mum decided to join us at the skating rink. I think maybe she just wanted to socialise with my friend's mum some more and get to know her husband better, since I was spending time with them every Friday. Prior to this, my mum hadn't been aware of how weird the dad was, but he continued his normal creepy behaviour, even in front of her. After that, my mum stopped letting me go to the skating rink with my friend. She did not explain why to my friend's parents. She just simply stopped letting me go. Well, the dad noticed and was bothered by this. So, he decided to show up at my house to explain things to my parents. He told them that I was a super special little girl, and that he just really liked me, but totally not in a creepy way or anything like that. But that was the end of my Friday night outings with my friend, for good. Luckily, nothing bad ever happened with this man. I'm so glad my mum never said yes about me staying over there. If you have read this whole story, you might be curious about my friend. My mum never called CPS on them, but she has said that she regretted not doing that. I don't really know my old friend that well anymore, but we are friends on Facebook. Her dad died a few years ago, and she seems to miss him. Before I continue with the final story, if you've enjoyed this video so far, please leave a like, a comment, and subscribe to see future content from me, as well as help me in the algorithm. Thank you. I was sleeping over at a neighbourhood friend's house when I was about 13. Her parents had left her for the night to to go to a friend's cabin, about an hour away. So the plan was to eat pizza, watch horror movies, and just be teenage girls for the night. Now we had grown up in the same little condo complex, and I knew her parents were raging alcoholics, and on a couple of occasions, she had wandered over to my house in the middle of the night, knocked on my bedroom window, and I'd let her in to escape their fights and get some sleep. My mum knew the deal, but by all measures was fairly lax, and she was okay with me going a few buildings over to spend the night with the knowledge that her parents weren't going to be there that evening. Anyway, we went to bed, probably around 1 AM, and at some point in the middle of the night/early morning, we woke up to bickering and arguing, coming up the walkway. I remember her quietly apologising to me because she didn't think they'd be home until the following afternoon. We just kind of laid awake, quietly listening to these two adults scream at each other, and then we heard a god-awful crack, followed by silence. That was terrifying in itself, but then my poor friend, who clearly lived through some terrible things she didn't deserve, pulled a massive chef's knife out from between the box spring and mattress, looked at me and said, "If I don't come back in 10 minutes, go out the window." I froze, and all I could hear was my friend yelling, "What did you do?" Followed by her mother yelling at her to hang up the phone and telling her, if the cops show up, she's going into the system. I didn't want to leave my friend, so I waited until I saw the red and blue lights outside, and then I crawled out the window and wandered over to my friend, who was crying and talking to the police. I remember seeing her parents' Toyota Echo with a smashed up front and both airbags deflated. They must have driven home drunk from the cabin. B, her mum sitting in a cop car, in handcuffs, yelling at the cops. And C, her dad getting hauled out on a gurney. Her mum had picked up a wooden piano bench and swung it at her dad's head. The cop was incredibly comforting to us both, but did explain that if he wasn't able to physically hand us off to adults, I just remember it was a scary alternative. So at about 4 AM, the cop walked us to my house, and I had to go wake up my mum to come take custody of my friend. And after that night, she ended up living with her aunt and uncle out of the city.